Hi, good evening. It's Sunday night, and I'm going to talk now about chapter two and what we should be concentrating on in terms of readings and also getting prepared to take the quiz for chapter two. I was having myself a lot of trouble getting on Blackboard this weekend. Since Friday, it was really, really slow, and then Saturday and Sunday, I couldn't even log on. And so, actually, I found that I could go through the CUNY portal and get onto Blackboard that way, but through Brooklyn College, it just was never loading for me, although a couple of students said they were able to get on, even though it was really slow. So anyway, we have the quiz up for tomorrow at 6 a.m., and it's going to be up all week for quiz 2. And I apologize that I'm running a little behind because I couldn't get onto Blackboard, and so I didn't read a lot of your projects and give grades. And I saw the things that some people sent me by email, but I haven't seen a lot of the work that was posted on Blackboard. So I'm going to be going through that tomorrow, and you should find most of your grades up by late Monday. So anyway, now for chapter 2, what we should be doing. I'm going to refer a little bit to my notes also. So in chapter 2, in the beginning, take a look at the Ben and Jerry's sort of overview of the company and history. Just kind of read that and think about, we're going to be doing ourselves a study of a Brooklyn-based business this semester. So just, it's a good introduction. Look at some of the challenges, some of the, how they got started, how it developed. And of course, think for every business like that that becomes very successful, that, most of them fail. And most marketing strategies fail. So think about that as an example of a business that was successful and that went through various phases in terms of its life and continued lifetime. In the chapter, there's also a discussion of the importance of organizations in marketing. So remember how marketing takes place in organizations, and all organizations are different. And it's important to understand that, there's one thing understanding the organization on paper. So you can look at, for example, an organizational chart, and you can see what the hierarchy looks like, the structure, but that's really not complete. That's, as we know, right? For most things, that's the way it looks. But if we actually get inside the company, we might find out that things are really different. What's going on is not exactly what's reflected on paper. And I love to give this example when I taught a organizational behavior course at Brooklyn College. I always gave the example when I was a secretary, when I was going to graduate school, I worked as a secretary. And I worked in a company that was a law firm. And we had senior partners in the law firm, and I was a secretary. And I was working with other secretaries in the company. And so you kind of get to know the structure of the company through, whatever level you're at the company, you have a certain kind of insight into what's going on. And it turned out that we found out pretty quickly that one of the secretaries was the girlfriend of one of the senior partners. And that was something that perhaps, maybe a lot of people didn't know in the organization. That information was not available to everyone. And so oftentimes people expect that the secretary is the least powerful person in the company. And especially sometimes you had interns, and this was a very prestigious law firm, so sometimes you had interns who came for internships and who were hoping very much to get hired, where you have new people that were hired in the company that didn't understand the culture, let's say, of the organization. So they just knew what the structure looked like on paper. And so what happened, which was really interesting, was that sometimes people were not very polite to this particular secretary, who was extremely well connected to the senior partner and knew him and could tell him if she didn't like someone, and that person could be fired. And so that's what happened a lot of times, that somebody got on her bad side because they didn't think she was very important. And then she would have dinner and she would tell her boyfriend that, that young person, that intern from Brooklyn College, let's say, or the person that you just hired who just graduated from Brooklyn College is obnoxious, is not smart, is ridiculous, is somebody that we shouldn't retain. And she might recount a story, and then all of a sudden he'd disappear not knowing what happened. But it was because of that interpersonal connection that things took a different trajectory than was expected. And so to understand organizations, we really have to understand the culture. We have to understand how people are connected. We have to understand the expectations. One of the other things that we have to think about in every organization, the structure, the culture, is going to be influenced by the type of organization. So if you are in a creative industry, it's going to have a very different leadership. It's going to have a very different kind of set of attitudes and values than a company maybe in finance or a company that's dealing with healthcare or social work or some other field. So each field kind of generates its own structure, its own culture. So in terms of the readings, you have a reading on organizational culture that I gave you from a book that I wrote, which has to do with the fashion industry. So you can take a look at that reading, and that'll give you some insight into a particular type of company and how it's structured and how it's organized. So take a look at that. So getting back to chapter 2, and remember that all our quizzes are going to be based on the textbook. So getting back to chapter 2, there's an interesting section in chapter 2 on page 26 about the problem of defining business too narrowly. And there's an example of the railroad industry. So it would be a good idea to read that and think about how important that is for today. So the railroad industry failed for the most part to really adapt and to think of itself as a leader and to think of itself as a leader in terms of transportation. And so other industries, airline industry, for example, automobile industry took over. And the transportation or the railroad industry, which failed to kind of see itself or failed to sort of adapt to the change, to the new kind of technologies and inventions that were coming on board, sort of stagnated. And so that's a very, very important thing for today. If you're in a business, you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to change. And we have that question in our luxury projects. How much, how much does luxury need to change? How much does luxury need to adapt to social media? Or should it stand apart? There are some people who are divided who would say, no, luxury really doesn't belong online. That's the one extreme. And luxury is an experience that has to take into account customer service and personalization. It's something exclusive. It's not for the masses. It's not something that should be available even online. But to get the real experience, one has to go into the store. One has to see the products, try them on, feel them, appreciate the craftsmanship. So think about this issue, and do luxury firms need to adapt? Probably the answer is yes, in some ways they do. But at the same time, they can't lose sight of their particular difference or their exceptional sort of status. And if they kind of go too fully forward, perhaps in certain ways, well, then how will they be different from Target, or how will they be different from American Eagle, or from Abercrombie, or from firms that, are really trying to reach as broad an audience as possible? So that's a question that we have to think about for luxury, but it's an interesting problem. On page 31 of chapter 2, look at and pay attention to the section about quantifying performance. So one of the important questions for businesses today is really how to develop some metrics to measure how successful they are. That's something that we have to think about in any kind of business. Page 33, diversification analysis. Look at and be familiar with the different ways that companies have at their disposal to increase sales in terms of current markets, in terms of reaching new markets. Just get a basic understanding for some of those issues. And page 34, the strategic marketing process. So understand generally how that process works. Take a look in your book at the concept of a SWOT analysis. Think about how that SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, how that kind of analysis can be applied, for example, to the business that you're going to study. So think about, start to imagine now what kind of business might you like to study? That's very close to Brooklyn College. That's within that Flatbush Junction area surrounding Brooklyn College. And think about the fact that you're going to have to analyze that business. You're going to have to look at what's working well, just like we're doing with the luxury project. What the weaknesses are, let's say for the luxury project of their websites, because we're going to concentrate on websites. What are some of the opportunities, right? What are some of the threats? What are some of the things they have to watch out for? So those are things that you're going to want to be able to perform yourself when it comes to analyzing the businesses you're studying. On page 37, take a look at the concept of the marketing program and look at how this notion of targeting customers works. So take a look at that and pay special attention. So I think if you focus on those concepts, get an overview of the chapter, you'll be fine for the chapter 2 quiz. And in the next lecture, we'll move forward and talk about the next concepts and talk a little bit more about, of course, a little bit later in the week about what's going to be due on Friday. Thanks for taking time to listen, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me by email. We can speak on Skype if you'd like to. I'll be in my office all day Tuesday for those who'd like to meet. Thank you. Have a good evening.